Hey guys, we're gonna be making another dish today that's sort of a little bit of a counterpart to our stuffed pepper dish. This is gonna be centering around poblano pepper, which is, as you know, very well known for Mexican inspired or Tex-Mex cooking, West cooking. And the difference between a poblano and a bell pepper is not a lot in terms of the structure and the consistency of the actual plant, but from a flavor point of view, it's very different. But the important part there is that, the reason why we associate these is because they're found in most of these dishes, and if you're ever in a pinch, you can substitute. I went ahead and prepared some ingredients here. You can see a lot of onion. It's diced, minced really in some parts. Diced tomato, one full tomato. You can take your pick. I like vine ripe. You could take Roma. Really, we're going to use it for flavoring. Have some cilantro leaves ready to go. No stems. You have some tomato paste. You have some poblano base. You could say it's a concentrated base. And you have here, which is really just sour cream with salt and pepper. I would say 2 to 1 on the salt to pepper, 2 being the salt, some lime juice, and an extra, full lime quartered, and then you put some lime juice in there, you keep the rest. This is really important later on, and you gotta let it sit as we're cooking, so make sure you do that first. Now I like to, for stuffed peppers or stuffed poblano dishes or things like that, in Mexican cooking, you have chile relleno. You definitely want to make sure that you core everything out. There's an easier way of doing it, depends on the pepper, but you can see where that just fell right out, and everything inside is pretty clean from the seeds. If you're going to use this as your carrier or your base, typically you would half it and then you would stuff it. Sometimes you layer it, but in this case we're not going to do that. We're actually going to dice this down and mince it, and so we're not really too concerned about preserving any of the shape, but what we want to do is make sure that we core it out, make sure that you tear down anything that you're not going to be using, that you wouldn't want to eat directly. So in other words, you won't have time to pick around it. Sometimes with stuffed bell peppers or stuffed chile relleno, or those dishes, you can kind of eat around the stem. Sometimes I like to even core that out so you can just dig in and eat everything that's in front of you. I'm not really too concerned about the shape. What we want to do is make sure it's just in little chunks, and I'm kind of cutting around here a full cutting board, so don't mind the seemingly haphazard cutting. Always want to be careful with your chef knife, and I did want to leave these here just so you could see them. So we're gonna also round off. Normally with these dishes we have to prepare some Southwest spice. It's about a 1/4 cup or maybe 2 tablespoons worth, maybe 1.5 tablespoons worth, and then have some stock also that we're gonna prepare. Typically for two servings, 2.5 servings, you want to use about a 1/4 stock per dish. And lastly, we have a container here of black beans and their juice. You can use canned, you can use boxed, you can use whatever your favorite brand is, as long as it's about 12 ounces or a cup worth or so, you should be okay. All right, so we'll go over to the stove and we'll start cooking. Okay, so we're gonna get going here with our cooking, and we have all our ingredients prepared that I just showed you in the background. A little bit of a taste here of how hot the pot is. Not super hot. It's about a medium heat, medium to high heat. And we're gonna start out by pouring in a little bit of oil. I would say on a scale of 1 to 5, a 2 or a 3. And the first thing we're gonna dive in with here and start to really get in terms of our flavor profile We're gonna really put the onions and the poblano in first and let that soften up. And everything is really gonna go in. And again, I think for many of you that have a nice cutting board, nice heavy cutting board, I recommend one of these foldable ones just because it depends on the dish you're making and your style. You can always use your knife to bring things in, but you can go straight from the cutting board in and use your chef knife. You can use your hand. And don't worry about it if you get a little bit too much in there. You'll leave a little bit out. Totally okay. The ingredients will work well with each other. What we want to do here is really make sure that we're making use of the oil. And initially, wow, the spice is really coming up. Initially, the liquid is going to carry the vegetables, and you hear that soothing sound. Hope you can hear that beautiful sound as it's cracking. And letting us know it's there, letting us know the heat is being accepted. And this sort of swirling into the pot. Really the basic thing there is the oil, the onion, the poblano. And if you're sitting or standing above the pot as you're cooking, you will instantly start to smell really wonderful ingredients. That's the difference between bell pepper and poblano. Really, one's really going to come at the flavor profile from a much more earthy, peppery point of view, and really let us know that through our vapor and our smell. There's plenty of more where that came from, so don't worry about spices running out or things getting too hot. This is going to really soften up, and what we want to do here is that we get a nice brown color. We're going to prepare in about 3 minutes from here. I'm going to prepare to add some of our other stock ingredients. You want to enjoy that sound, that simmering. And you want to make sure that you have plenty of water in there, but at the same time that you're transferring the cook from the pan to the vegetables. Here we go. And so you're gonna let the water do its thing. You're gonna let the vegetables soak in that moisture and soften. And once the heat transfer continues, you'll notice a little bit of a transformation process. And it kind of reminds us that life is about change. And even though it's a same vegetable, it came into our kitchen as it starts to transform into different forms, and it can do more than what it was carried into our kitchen as. It can turn into a softer leafy vegetable. It can turn into an ingredient for thousands of dishes, but tonight it's going to be a delicious poblano soup. So you want to really make sure the heat is going. It's been about 4.5, 5 minutes in here on medium to high heat. You're not hearing as much crinkling. You're really hearing just the water at this point. And you could totally see the green into the onion, the transparency of the onion. It will not caramelize. There's no reason for it to. It's just going to soften. And imagine this floating in your soup. And that's where you want to look ahead and get your ingredients to. If you can't imagine what's in your pot at this moment in your soup later, then you gotta keep cooking it. So if it's too crunchy, it's too heavy still, keep cooking until you get to a point where the onion and the poblano is really complementary to a soup base versus, let's say you were making stir fry or something else. You want to keep a little bit more of the shape. Maybe you're making carrots and onions roasted for a side dish. Definitely want to have a different take on it. So that's why we mince really finely. That's why we make everything really thin. And now we're ready to start to really make this into a soup and not just cook vegetables. I'm going to add a little bit of salt before we begin. 3 servings, 6 shakes every step of the way. And now we're ready for some more. Now it's really sparingly sizzling, so it's telling us there's more. We're gonna add our Southwest spice. First. We're gonna add everything eventually, but it's really more about the order of things going in here. We're gonna add the onion, the tomato next, and the paste. So think of this as a tomato step. And really slow down on the cooking to make sure everything is in there. And so we're gonna really heat this up, heat these new ingredients up, transfer some of that heat from the old ingredients to the new ones. And I can tell you at this point, if you're cooking this at home eventually, you will be smelling a lot of different stuff in there. And we're gonna do the spice. And now this is the max of our Tex-Mex right here. And you'll notice it's very, very thick. The paste is really going to make this very thick. What you want to watch out for is that any sticking, even on the sides of your pot, kind of want to make sure you have plenty of water in there. Can't go wrong with water, kind of like what we did with our chili. You can always simmer away some water. The ingredients in these kinds of dishes need to blend together anyway, so water is sort of a heat transfer. Nonetheless, we want to make sure everything is really temperature-wise, it's really at the same temperature before we start to introduce significantly new ingredients like the next big step for us, which is our beans and our filler, if you will. So we want to make sure everything here is heating up, not necessarily cooking through. We did all our cooking early on. The vegetables are the only things we want to really cook. This is really more about heating evenly and making sure we're ready for the next step. Once you start to smell everything, you want to now go in with the beans and be careful not to spill too much, which of course I will probably do and always do. And you hear the heat sort of go down and quiet down and really go away, then you'll hear it come back, and it will come back. What we want to do is make sure we add about half a cup to 3/4 of a cup of water, and from here on out it's going to be a cooking down into a consistency that we want to have for soup. If you're gonna serve this as a side dish to something else, I recommend leaving it a little bit more on the watery side. If you're gonna make this the main dish, I think a little bit more hearty is better, and you can definitely reheat also if you have leftovers. You can then, if you want later, add some additional water. If you want to turn this into a beef, ground beef mixture, it's very close to a chili at that point, but this will definitely be a good base for that. That's the only difference between chili, and you've seen the warm me up chili video. This is basically vegetarian, in that there's no beef. And I'm gonna add some stock and probably thicken it out a little bit. I'm gonna add some pepper, just one light sprinkling, kind of like that first rain, that first 10 minutes of rain or snow, and the snow starts to come down, that just kind of gets on top of things, and you could kind of see it just rest there ever so calmly. As the heat starts to build, you remember that nice comforting simmering went away. We went from that, which was a much more involved process, bringing out all the smells very, very quickly, very strongly up in steam. This is much slower. You got to give it some time, and it's going to start to kind of work its way from the middle, where you kind of know where the heat spots are in your pot. And if you listen very carefully, you can hear it. That's what you want to do. Take a breath, smell the ingredients, relax, know that you're doing a great job and you're almost there with your soup. Looking forward to that taste. I'm not going to disturb it too much. Just want to make sure the sides are loosened. And you could see some activity. Gives us a little bit of time to pause and really hear that. I don't know if you can hear it. And now you're starting to see the bubbling, and it's ever so patiently building up and telling us that even though we don't see the whole pot of stuff underneath this top layer where we sprinkled and peppered and salted, there is a world of activity underneath. And we will know when this is going, we will know then that it is time to consider scooping something out and taking a taste. For serving, just thinking ahead as we wait ever so patiently. We're gonna serve this in a bowl. You're gonna use some of that sour cream mix, salt, pepper, 2-to-1, 3-to-1 even, and lemon or lime juice rather on the sour cream. It makes a total difference. You don't want to thicken this with sour cream in this case. What you want to do is have the sour cream come in at the end as you're serving and have that be the dollop. You can give your guest a section of the lime, and we're gonna drop some cilantro leaves on top of the soup purely for balance, and some chips maybe to the side. Corn chips work great. If you have some leftover tortilla from another dish and you want to make that into your chip, you can just sort of put it to the heat again, make it stiff, or if you like it soft is okay too. But you want to complement this with some type of flour, some type of corn or flour based chip, tortilla, something. And you can see here the heat pockets start to build up again right in the middle. You can see the steam, no surprise there. And what I'm gonna go for is not a very watery or soupy soup, but I'm gonna definitely leave this as something you can put in a thermos easily, something you can reheat in a microwave fairly easily, and something that will soak up chips. And I also want it to go quite a ways. I'll take a little taste just to see how our salt is. And how our poblano is. Definitely spicy. Definitely spicy. A little bit more pepper. I'm gonna do this slow cooking. We're gonna simmer here. Now I can definitely smell the poblano coming out. And some of our Tex-Mex spices really blending in well. You see that beautiful glossy soup. Makes us wonder how many beans are in this soup. 1 tomato, 1 poblano, 126 beans. We don't know. And how many grains of salt, how many grains of pepper, we don't know. But luckily we don't need to know to enjoy our soup. So I'm gonna let this simmer a little bit more, and I'll check back in as we start to serve. All right guys, so it's been simmering a while and we're ready to start serving. I went ahead and I took 1 bowl, and you can see here it's not a lot to it. Just make sure you pour carefully, don't spill on the outside. And there's a dollop of that sour cream that I showed you. Very important for this dish. Have it on the side for your guests, and some cilantro as well. All right, thank you. Don't forget, you can add cheese to this to taste. You can add anything you want as far as dairy is concerned, but I recommend you start out without cheese on top directly. Let your guests add it, make them part of the interactive experience of serving, and hope they enjoy. Thanks for watching.